Hello everyone, this is Akshay over here and welcome to Akshay's Biology classes. In today's video, we will be mainly looking into pedigree analysis. A pedigree is basically a chart that mainly shows the lineage or ancestry of a particular family. So analysis of a pedigree chart is one of the most common questions that we see in the competitive examination. So in this particular video, we will be mainly trying to understand the symbols that are used in a standard pedigree. And also, we will look into some of the common inheritance patterns that we see regarding with respect to a particular trait. So without much delay, let's get started. So the first symbol here is a square. A square mainly indicates a male and a circle mainly indicates a female. In the case of an individual whose sex is not known, then we use rhombus. When an individual is actually affected, we generally shade that particular complete symbol. And in the case, if the person is carrier, that is, a carrier is a person who has the gene for the particular trait but does not show it. So in this case, generally we indicate a carrier with a dot inside the symbol. And when the person is deceased, then we draw a horizontal line on that particular symbol. Now, a horizontal line between the male and female indicates mating, and a vertical line mainly shows the offsprings. And in general, when you need to show the generation in the family, we use the Roman numericals. So in this case, the Roman numerical 1 mainly indicates the first generation and the Roman numerical 2 mainly indicates second generation. In the case of twins, the vertical line splits into 2. Okay, and you can see that if the two vertical lines are connected by another horizontal line, it indicates that it is an identical twin. But if there is no connection, then it is called as a non-identical twin. And if there are two horizontal lines connecting between the male and female, it indicates consanguinity, which mainly means that mating between the related individuals. So these are the general symbols that actually we see in the pedigree, and knowing and understanding these many symbols will do the job for us major of the times. There are other symbols also, but as I can say, I can assure you very much confidently that learning these symbols is sufficient for us. So now we will look into the mode of inheritance. In the case of mode of inheritance, we see there are 5 mode of inheritance, that is the autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, and X-linked recessive. And finally, we also have one more mode of inheritance, that is Y-linked inheritance. So basically, any trait that we study, they are mainly inherited with any one of these mode of inheritance. So let us look into some of the basic characteristic feature of each of these inheritance, so that we can get a better understanding regarding the mode of inheritance. The first one we are having is the autosomal dominant. So in the case of a pedigree chart, if you are suspecting that it is a autosomal dominant, then obviously there is no skipping of generation of a trait. So if you see that the parents are affected, obviously the offsprings are also affected. Hence we say that there is no skipping of generation. And also the trait appears in both the sex with equal frequency. It is not that males or females are more affected. It appears in both sexes with equal frequency. And now, the most important point is that when one of the parent is affected, that is heterozygous in condition, and the other parent is normal, approximately half of the offsprings will be affected. We will be using this rule when we are solving the questions. The next one we are having is the autosomal recessive. The first point of autosomal recessive is that there's a skipping of generation, which means that when a parent is affected or not affected, that is, they don't show the trait, but however, the grandchildren will show the trait. And it appears, the trait again appears in both sexes with equal frequency. Affected children are generally born to unaffected parents. This is another important trait that we have to remember. So if we are seeing a trait in any particular generation, we have to see that whether their parents are affected or not in a pedigree chart. The next one is that when both parents are heterozygous, basically carrier. Carrier, as I said, carrier is the one that actually has the gene for that particular trait but does not show the trait. So when both the parents are heterozygous, approximately 1/4 of the offsprings will be affected. Again, we will be using this rule in solving the questions. So the next one we are having is the X-linked dominant. In the case of X-linked dominant, again, there is a common trait, common important aspect, that is there is no skipping of generation. Both males and females are equally affected. Generally, we see that an affected son must have an affected mother. But in the case of affected daughter, she must have either a affected father or affected mother. Affected father will transmit that particular trait to all of his daughters. Remember this, very, very important point that we have to remember. An affected father will transmit that particular trait to all his daughters only. But whereas the affected mother, if heterozygous, right? Which means that one of the X chromosome is carrying that particular affected trait, but the other X chromosome is completely normal. The affected mother will pass the trait to half of his sons and half daughters. The next one we are having is the X-linked recessive. In the case of X-linked recessive, there is a skipping of generation. So you can notice the pattern that we are actually looking into. In the case of dominant trait, irrespective, that is X-linked dominant or an autosomal dominant, there is no skipping of generation. But however, if it is a recessive trait, that is an X-linked recessive or an autosomal recessive, we see that there is skipping of generation. So this one is very much common, that is skipping of generation. The next one is that usually males are more affected than the females. Affected sons are born to unaffected mothers, another important aspect. Hence, the unaffected mothers are called as carriers. They have that particular gene, but however, they do not show that particular trait. Carrier daughters are born to affected fathers, and half of the carrier sons are also affected. So these are the salient features of X-linked recessive. And finally, moving on to, we will look into the Y-linked. The Y-linked is pretty much straightforward because there is no skipping of generation, and generally we see that only males are affected, right? And interestingly, this trait is passed from father to son. So with respect to autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant or X-linked recessive, you see that the trait is never passed from father to son. Only in the case of Y-linked, you see that the trait is passed from father to son. So with all these salient features of each and every pattern of inheritance, we shall solve some important questions in the next video. So in this video, we have mainly understood the symbols that are generally used in the pedigree analysis, and also we have looked into some of the salient features or characteristics of inheritance patterns. So if you understand the mode of inheritance very clearly, then you will be able to solve the pedigree chart or pedigree diagrams. So I will meet you people with another video where I will solve some questions with respect to pedigree and covering all these 5 mode of inheritance patterns. So till then, bye and thank you.